Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about data literacy, what it means, how it helps businesses, and most important, how you can work to improve data literacy. To discuss that, I'm joined by two industry experts. With me is Jackie Yeaney, Chief Marketing Officer at Tableau. Jackie, hello to you today.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me.
Also joining us is Merav Yuravlivker, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Data Society. Merav, good to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So data literacy can be a complicated topic. In terms of data literacy and effectively mining data, what's your sense of where many companies are these days? Are they struggling with it, or are they relatively mature? Jackie, what do you see out there?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that everyone from the executive down to the frontline worker on the manufacturing floor will become a data person, and that these skills are going to be more and more in demand, especially for young new hires. But we've got a big gap. we, we
Mm.
are we are we are not there yet. So there was an IDC study recently that I think 83% of CEOs are saying they really want and need their companies to be data driven, but less than a third of their employees feel comfortable actually using data and analytics to make their decisions.
That is a pretty surprising gap, actually. So it's actually a minority of the employees really are comfortable with data analytics. We do have
That's
quite a
right.
ways to go. Yeah. Marav, what would you add? I mean, where are companies these days in your view? Are they on board or not quite yet?
I think Jackie's right on the money there in that many companies understand the value of data. I'd argue most folks do, but don't really understand where to start. And what we've seen in terms of a trend is that over the past 5 years, companies are starting to hire more data scientists. We're seeing pockets and teams of data professionals, but now it's a question of developing that data culture across the entire company and organization. And that's where we are seeing that challenge right now.
Hmm.
And
What if
James, I'll
it's,
also say,
go
I mean,
ahead,
I know,
please.
I work for Tableau, and
Mhm.
technology should be a part of this. And
Right.
even tools like Tableau, we need to do better at it being, easier for your average business person to use. But
Mhm.
I hear just what Merav hears. The real struggle is in the data cultures that these organizations are trying to create.
What does it mean to do better in terms of making it easier? Is it a user interface issue, or is it something else in your sense, Jackie?
I think it's some user interface. Tableau, I mean, I think Tableau was originally designed to be, quote, easy to use.
Right.
But as Merav probably well knows, it's easy to use if you're a data analyst, if that's your
Hmm.
job.
Hmm.
If I'm a marketer on Jackie's team, like say at my last company where I wasn't working at Tableau, they were
Mhm.
kind of intimidated and they needed the Tableau expert to sit next to them and show them how to use it.
Hmm.
So I think it's some making some of the drag and drop things easier, knowing how to link to the data sources, those sorts of things.
Interesting. So say there's this theoretical company out there that they want to improve data literacy. They want to build a culture around effective data usage and data mining. What advice would you give them? Marav, where should they start?
Sure. It's important to think through it holistically. So there are a few components to consider. The first is hiring. Everybody wants to hire data scientists. There is a big shortage of them. In fact, last year, there was an estimate of over 250,000 data science jobs that went unfilled. So
Mhm.
hiring is a good way to maybe get some deep experts on the bench, but it won't solve that gap. So hiring is point one. Point two is training. For everyone else who exists, how can they start to speak the same language and develop that same data vocabulary so they can communicate effectively between data and non-data professionals? So it's developing that training program, having that continuous learning. And that's what we do as a company, is working with a lot of organizations to help them develop and run their types of training programs. And that's a really great component to have in there. The third
Hmm.
component is really more broadly speaking, getting the leadership on board and making sure that it's very clear what the data principles are. Data governance is a big component of that as well. So how do people need to be thinking about data across the company, handling the data? And then also that infrastructure piece. What tools do you already have? I mean, most companies we work with have those Tableau licenses, right? So then it's a question of how many people know how to use Tableau within the organization, and how can we get them to start to leverage tool. So developing that infrastructure and understanding how to do that, that's that additional component there. So altogether, it sounds like a lot. I would encourage any organization that wants to go through this transition to be patient, to estimate your timeline in years, not in months, and to figure out what are some of the low-hanging fruits that you can achieve first. What are those quick wins to get people excited about becoming more data-driven?
Being patient about the data analytics. Somehow I think that the companies are anxious, like we need results really next week or maybe a month from now. Yeah, we can't wait years, but I realize that full maturity could take years. Jackie, what would you advise companies that if they want to build a company culture?
I agree with everything with that, what Rob was just saying. So maybe two other thoughts from the conversations with organizations that I have is kind of this top down and bottoms up approach. So Merav was mentioning, getting the leadership involved. The companies that I see most successful, yes, the CEO and the entire executive team is on this data journey and they support it, they make it a value, and they kind of make analytics the job for all, not just the BI department or IT or something like that. But let's say your executive team isn't quite there. The success I've seen is starting with like an executive dashboard where you make sure you've got the data sources to feed the most important metrics that the business is running, and you bring that into the executive team meetings and the board meetings. And it sounds simple, but that's how I got the data culture to kind of the flywheel to go at my last company. And then on the notion of the bottoms up, there are people in your organization using data to make decisions today, even if you're at the very beginning of your journey. Find them, spotlight them, show them as the great example, make them data champions. I know Red Hat did that. I know Jaguar Land Rover did that, and they really saw a lot of power in it.
Jackie, you mentioned the idea of the executive dashboard and bottoms up and then tops down, but it seems like one of the challenges here is getting all the staff involved, not just the C-suite. Maybe that's what you're talking about, but is that not one of the biggest ideas to data literacy, is getting everyone involved?
Yes, absolutely. But I'm just saying it's hard to create them from scratch, and they already kind of exist. So find them and yes, plant data champions inside different aspects of the organization to kind of get that rolling.
Yeah. One of the pieces I like more, just to quickly add, is developing types of lunch and learns, exhibits, presentations of successful data projects within an organization. That gets a lot of attention and shows other colleagues and people in the company, hey, how can I get to this point too? So it gets them excited as well.
What about challenges? I mean, companies are going to start to do this or are doing that now, and then they're running into some challenges, perhaps plenty of challenges. Merav, what do you think a challenge would be, and how would you address it?
There are a few challenges. I'll pull out some that we've seen in our work. One is an organization understanding that it takes time and that time needs to be allocated to their workforce to get up and running. So whether it's through training, whether it's through independent projects, infrastructure, people need to be able to dedicate maybe a couple hours a week, a month, to go and learn these new skills and to learn this new vocabulary and to put it into practice. So working with managers to give them a time allocation, let's say, to give people the space that they need to learn, I would say that's point one, that's a challenge. And really the bigger challenge is just breaking down that barrier to entry. There's a lot of trepidation about data. There's a lot of nervousness about it. And folks who are not comfortable with the language tend to shy away from it. So one of the things that we see in a lot of the work that we do is there's this big, again, communication gap between the data and the non-data professionals. So helping to bridge that gap by doing a workshop. So for example, we do executive level workshops, we do general staff workshops, just 6 hours. You are opening them up to a whole world of how to think about data and how to use it effectively. And then from there, they can get to that 0 to 1 level where they start to be more comfortable with data. So it's really a whole mindset shift that needs to happen in order to be the foundation for any organization.
Jackie, what do you see in terms of a challenge and some way it could be fixed?
Yeah, and as I was listening to Merav, there's this one notion in my mind, I'm curious if she agrees with me or not, that I've actually been starting to steer away from data literacy. because it implies a yes or a no, and I think makes it kind of the scary aspect. And am I data illiterate? Doesn't feel very good. So I've been starting to say data fluency, implying it's more of a journey. And at the beginning, you get to know the basics, and I can say, ask where the bathroom is, right? But then I start to learn more of the language. Yes, exactly. So, so I think that's part of it. And there is this big foundational gap out there, I think bigger than most of us realized. And so very recently, Tableau pledged to help teach or enable 10 million data learners over the next 5 years, because we aren't going to get anywhere unless, thanks. I'm pretty excited about it, unless we can get that foundation built. And then another big issue I see, say companies are they're getting along on this data culture journey, and they're opening up access to data and analytics to thousands of their employees. Well, now they've got a data governance issue. So now you really have to, it's like be careful what you wish for. So now I've got 5,000 people accessing data and creating visualizations, and are they using the single source of truth? Can I certify dashboards, ththese sorts of things? So I find there's this very messy middle when you kind of start to open it up that people have to work through.
Right. The data learners is a really interesting idea. Who are those students, and where do they work at or go to school at?
When we help them learn, you mean? And
are there individuals being targeted in a certain cohort? Are they at companies? Where are the learners themselves?
No, that's a great question. So we're planning it across the board. So yes, we do have something called Tableau Academic, where we provide free licenses and curriculums and such for people in undergrad. We want to work with nonprofits and our local communities on helping the general public to become more data literate. And then yes, of course, we also want to focus on instructor-led training and the sorts of things that Merav centers on every day, and e-learning and things like that for the knowledge workers, if you will.
Interesting. Okay.
If we're going to get to 10 million, I gotta go all the way across.
I was going to say, it's a fairly large number. You've got to cast a wide net there, to be sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's look to the future. I'm thinking there's going to be some year, in the middle of the decade or so, very towards the later of the decade, where we are all going to be fluent, or maybe it's still going to be a struggle there. What do you see when you look to the future of data literacy or data fluency? Merav, what's your view?
I think it's going to be a while before we get to a stage where everyone experiences that data fluency or even that foundational level of data literacy. And why is that? If we look at the workforce, we have millions and millions of folks who were not privy to learning about data when they were in school, and just getting them up to speed will take a long time. But I think as we see them getting trained up and new folks coming into the workforce that have that data fluency there, we're going to start to see that gap close. One of the biggest trends that we're seeing now is a shift again from training programs to holistically thinking about culture. And what does that entail? It's a lot of communication and collaboration. And so actually we're developing a new product. We're releasing it next year. It's our first one. We're really excited. That's actually a platform that combines our instructor-led training programs along with mentorship programs, and then communication templates for our L&D teams to help them more easily reach out to their staff and help better equip them to communicate the benefits of these types of training programs. So I think what we'll see, in addition to people becoming more data literate and data fluent, is this bigger drive towards thinking more about community, cohort-based learning, capstone projects, communication within the organization, and really seeing that shift. Now, do I think that's going to happen in 10 years across all industries? That would be great. We're working very hard to get there. I don't think we're going to see that happen, but do I think this will be the default within 2 decades? I think that's a real possibility.
Jackie, what do you see when you look into your crystal ball in terms of the future of data literacy? When is it going to get easy for us?
Yeah, I don't know. With Merav, it's hard to say, but I do think we're accelerating. I think there's a lot more understanding and focus on this topic. I think the pandemic and the digitization of most companies have kind of woke people up, if you will. So If I am gonna like try to be bold, I think within like 5 to 7 years on job listings, data skills is going to be there, just like today we tend to say communication skills.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Why did I not get a college degree in data science? That's where I'll always.
It's never too late, you know. It's never too late.
I can enroll in the Tableau program and actually become a data
That's
fluent
right.
person.
That's
So,
right.
Yeah. All right. Jackie, Merav, I totally appreciate you sharing your expertise today. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was. Thanks, James. Thanks, Merav.